All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to our webinar. Thank you for joining us on this Tuesday evening. So first off, I guess you're seeing a new face. Ariana hosted this last time, and you guys haven't met me yet. So I'm Plenty. I started with firearms legal protection about a month ago, I guess. So excited to be a part of the team, join in and talk about all this stuff that is so critically important. So as you know, there have been some really questionable executive orders, executive actions, and so that's what we're going to talk about. About a few weeks ago, we talked about some pending legislation, some stuff that was in Congress, and Terry and Dean did a really good job covering that stuff, explaining what that could mean to us as gun owners. So if you missed that presentation, make sure to go on our YouTube channel. It's just Firearms Legal Protection on YouTube. Go back in there, check that out. It's really good info. So right now we're just going to give everybody just a couple seconds just to kind of join in, just to sign up. If you need to share this with anybody at the last minute, go ahead and do so. But just to kind of talk about the topic for tonight, we're mostly going to be going through these executive actions, talking about what do they mean. Some of them are really vague, so we want to clarify that. And not only what do they mean in terms of at the top level, what's going to happen, but how they actually affect us in terms of firearms that we currently possess, things that we're thinking about doing, and then maybe things we own or how we store them or how we can protect ourselves and just what it means to us as gun owners. So to help us kind of conquer these topics tonight. So we've got Dean and Terry. They're going to be going into detail on all of these. And then at the end, we're going to have a Q&A section. So if you have any questions during the presentation, just make sure to log them in the Q&A box. So you'll see a general comment box. You can use that if you just want to chime in, say, hey, bring up a good point. Please do. We want this to be interactive. We'll be reading your comments kind of as we go. But if you have a question, make sure to log it in that question field so that at the end we can circle back to that and make a point to bring that up in the Q&A. So with that, we've got quite a few people in here. I'm seeing hello from Michigan, hello back from Texas, hello from Dallas. So that's where we're at. So good to see lots of people chime in from all over the U.S. So with that, I think let's get into it. So Terry, Dean, what's the news?
Plenty, thank you, and Plenty. It's great having you as part of the FLP team. Thanks for being around. And for those of you who missed it a few weeks ago, I am here with a phenomenal attorney Dean Greenblatt. I've had the opportunity to work with Dean on many cases. One of the things that Dean is very passionate about making sure that people like us, firearms folks, have their rights protected. Dean has worked on things here in Michigan in terms of cases before the Michigan Supreme Court. We've had I've had the opportunity to work with Dean on the Secretary of State ruling, which he tried to ban people from bringing firearms to vote. And most recently, Dean's also lead counsel trying to get people here in Wayne County, which is where Detroit is located, the opportunity to basically force the clerk to accept applications. So
do her job.
Do her job, absolutely. So Dean, thank you for being here. And one side note, Dean's a pilot, and more importantly, Dean's a very good friend. And he might be one of the attorneys, if you are ever in need here in Michigan, he is part of our attorney network. So Dean, let's get into this today. Let's talk about the gentleman that is on 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue and some of the things that he's talking about. One of the things that we're hearing lots of things about is this term called ghost guns. Is that like a gun from the dead? I mean, what do they mean when they say ghost guns?
Yeah, I think ghost guns was kind of a pejorative term. It was a term.
Big word. He's an attorney, guys.
That's not for that word. Much like assault weapons or high capacity magazines and things like that. These are terms that are generated by people that are not particularly friendly with firearms, and they're using it to try to instill a certain amount of fear. I think what it is intended to refer to is privately made firearms. And people have been making firearms since firearms were invented.
Now, when you say privately made, I mean, so that basically most people go to, either an FFL or buy it from their friends or neighbors. But there's a big market. There's lots of people, my understanding, that actually go out and do what you're talking about.
Absolutely. It's a lot of fun to make your own.
Now, is this legal?
It is absolutely legal. Anyone who is not otherwise suffering from some disability to possess firearms, either in their own state or federally, can make and possess their own privately made firearm.
Now, in doing so, help me understand. I mean, it sounds like it's what's the word? It's like I don't know what. It's just like amazing. You mean I can just get parts and put together a firearm like a jigsaw puzzle? I mean, how does that work?
It's a lot of fun to make your own things, and if they work, that's even better.
Got it.
In the aviation world, people make their own airplanes.
Really?
Yeah. So amateur built airplanes or experimental aircraft are made, and people can make their own firearms and experiment with their own techniques. They can make it completely on their own, or they could buy a kit or the basic parts and then finish a firearm.
Okay, well, let's talk about that. Now, you said they can buy like a kit or something. I mean, now one of the big things that the gentleman on 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, per our last conversation, they want everything registered, serialized, and
Right.
I'm assuming these firearms are not. I mean, they don't come with a number, right?
Right. It was the Gun Control Act of 1968 that created the requirement to serialize firearms. And that requirement, the GCA, the Gun Control Act, only applies to commercial transactions. So people that are manufacturing, companies that are manufacturing firearms, they're required to apply a serial number to the frame of the firearm.
Okay.
And the people who sell them are required to record in their own books the intake, the firearms come into their possession. They record the number, and when they sell them, it goes out of their book. So those numbers are a way of tracking commercial transactions.
So basically, if I want to buy a SIG, before SIG can ship it to the FFL, and for those of you, as Plenty talked about our YouTube channel, we talk about what an FFL is and how they work and things along those lines. You may want to check that out. But from the perspective of purchasing purchasing, SIG manufacturers, they put this number on, correct?
That's right.
It goes to an FFL. So when I go to the FFL, this firearm is tracked from basically the time it's made until the time it hits me, correct?
Yeah, and I think the theory is, it doesn't really work that well in practice, but the theory is if you happen to find a firearm that was used in a crime, so it's at the scene of a crime, the authorities can pick it up, they can look at it, they see the serial number on it, they can track the whereabouts of that firearm from the time that it was manufactured through to where it was sold to through a marketer to a federal firearms licensee the first time. And then they can go to the federal firearms licensee, the FFL, and determine who he sold it to. Now, that doesn't help much if the firearm has been sold multiple times after that. And in reality, it really doesn't do that much because of all the crimes that take place. How often are firearms left behind? If someone's robbing a bank, excuse me, they don't present the firearm and then say, well, I'm just going to leave this here, and now I'm going to leave with my bag of cash.
Right.
That's not what happens. So there's no way to know what a serial number is on a firearm that was used in a crime unless it happens to be left behind.
So what's the big deal about these, as we say, ghost guns that, I mean, I should be able to make I mean, it's legal, make my own firearm.
It is legal to make your own. Although in California,
here we go. Here we go, California.
California has addressed the issue of privately made firearms and decided that in order to make your own, you have to apply a serial number to it. And the authorities in California will give you a number, and then you have to put it on the firearm.
So you have to apply for a serial number for all practical purposes. get it approved. So it's just another way of tracking what you're doing.
Yeah, the California Department of Justice will give the number, and then you put it on the firearm.
Interesting.
But I don't know of any crimes have ever been solved, where a firearm has been used in a crime and the firearm is gone. How do they know what the serial numbers are?
Oh, exactly. Now, I want to go back to this for a minute. So you mentioned the term kit. So basically, it's my understanding that these executive orders want to make sure that ghost guns go away, correct?
I don't know if it's an executive order. It's a pronouncement from the office of the president that they're going to begin certain initiatives, of which coming up with a policy to determine the legality and how ghost guns can be monitored and controlled. So back on April 7th,
Right.
The president announced that he was going to follow through on some initiatives, and one of which is figuring out what to do.
Right.
What's the Justice Department going to do about ghost guns? Because occasionally they show up at a crime scene, but of course in very limited numbers.
So it's not really a, big deal. And what I mean by big deal is people aren't necessarily out here making their own firearms and then running out to commit crimes.
No, and if the concern is that people are illegally making firearms and then putting them into the stream of commerce, and so that they can be sold illegally, nothing that the president's proposed pronouncement will do to prevent that from happening. And people have made firearms for hundreds of years, and if they're going to use them in a crime, they're going to use them in the crime. And putting a serial number on one that's not going to be used in a crime is, not going to help anybody. And the fact of the matter is the people that are making them with the intent that they be used in a crime aren't going to put the serial numbers on them anyway.
Well, let me go back to this. So I get this kit, and I mean, is it like Legos? Do I just have to snap A to B and B to C and C to D and then insert a magazine, or how does that work? Do I have to do any work on this firearm? I mean, I hear these terms, uppers and lowers, and I know they're not drugs, but 80%. And I mean, what do those terms mean?
Well, I brought some props with me today. So here, for example, this is a finished AR-15 lower receiver. And it's the only, it's forged out of a piece of aluminum. There's a fair amount of milling that goes into it.
Now, do you do is this how it comes?
Well, this one happens to be finished, so I can show you that you have a mag well that's been milled out. You have the rear stock support has been milled and it's been tapped, and then it's been milled out here for the fire control group. And it's been cross-drilled for hammer pins and trigger pins and a selector. But if you get what they call an 80% lower, an unfinished firearm, it can come in this situation where there was no cross-drilling of holes. The fire control group pocket hasn't been milled out, and there's no place for a trigger to go. There's no place for a hammer to go. There's no way for you to do anything with this for self-defense or for offensive purposes, unless you happen to throw it at them, because it weighs about 1.5 pounds.
That's very heavy.
Dean, just to take a quick step back, so both of those, before they're operational, obviously you have to still do quite a bit to them. So it's not whether it's operational or not, the actual part, even though you still have to complete it, it's whether that part itself is a firearm or not the completed thing.
So ATF, manufacturer will send a part in, and it will not be complete. There's quite a bit of milling operation in the case of an AR-15 lower, where you have to mill out the fire control pocket. You have to precision drill cross drill the hammer pins and the trigger pins, and there's a fair amount of work. And if you have the know-how and you have the equipment, or if you go to a place where you can buy the equipment, and you take it home, this would take about, I would say, at least 7 hours of dedicated work if you knew what you were doing and you
So
had
if
all the
you
equipment and all the parts.
so if you were some criminal or some nefarious actor, that certainly does not sound like the easiest way to just grab something to do something. You have to be very intentional, very mechanically inclined. It doesn't seem like the easy shortcut way for somebody who's just trying to do something bad.
Absolutely. I know a lot of firearm owners, and you know, to walk in here with an unfinished receiver and say that, you know, well, if you got all the equipment and specialized equipment and you're going to spend 7 hours on it and you have the know-how, you can put this together and go, really? I wouldn't even know how to start. And
Right.
it takes a fair amount of research and a fair amount of machining skills in the case of an AR-15.
So this is like a hobby for all practical purposes.
It is a hobby, but that's how firearms kind of got their start. And if you think back to the Revolutionary War, or even before the Revolutionary War, you have the Kentucky long rifle and things like that. Those were basically not produced in large quantity by commercial manufacturers. These were produced, you know, in 5, 10, a dozen maybe in a year by people that were highly skilled, and they spent a lot of time on it. And they did it because they enjoyed it and because they could sell it.
Well, with these though, I mean, so do you believe the executive pronouncement, as you call it, is this more about serializing, or is this more about just trying to stop people from doing this hobby?
Yeah, I think that the ultimate goal of those that want to have ghost guns restricted is to prevent people from doing it. It's absolutely it's people could go out and buy a firearm. There's another example. This is the Polymer 80, which is kind of it uses the Glock fire system.
Right.
It requires you know, hours of work and studying and to put it all together and then mill it out. And you know, it will cost more money to actually and more time to mill it out and assemble it and buy all the parts, put it together, and then it would be to go out and buy a commercial one.
Right. Right.
So the restrictions, I think, are intended to basically eliminate the homemade firearm industry.
So let me ask this. So we were talking before we get going here, you know, about the pieces and things. I mean, so if I wanted to build one of these, could I just order everything? It just comes in. When I say everything, I mean the barrel, the trigger, you know, the magazine, just get it all in one box and have it shipped to me? Or how does that work?
Yeah, Polymer 80 was raided a few months ago when they were selling complete kits.
Right.
So you'd have the unfinished firearm lower, you'd have a slide, a barrel, the parts kits that are required to finish the receiver and the slide, and of course you need your night sights to go on there as well. And they were putting it all in one box, and the ATF rated and said, well, you know what, that's a little bit too close to a completed firearm, so we don't think you should be doing that.
So wait a minute, just so I'm clear on this. So I have 10, 15 different pieces that are not assembled. They go into a box, and the ATF stopped and said, this is too close to a real assembled gun?
Yeah, despite the fact that they don't have a problem with you buying the unfinished receiver, because it takes hours and hours to finish the receiver, and special skills and knowledge. And but yeah, they just didn't like the fact that it all came with the individual parts. Apparently that makes it too easy.
So it sounds like they're really regulating intent at that point. So it's as if I go to the grocery store and I buy lettuce and tomatoes and bread and ground beef. They're saying that's the exact same as buying a hamburger.
Right.
Yes.
Except it's not.
Right. Exactly. Right. And it's no more a complete firearm if you buy each part separately than if you buy all the parts together in one box, because you still have to go through the process of finishing a receiver, which which takes time and skill, like we've been saying. Now, the president has put forth these initiatives to regulate those guns, and he also, through his Attorney General, Merrick Garland now, and the Department of Justice has come out with a notice of proposed rulemaking.
Right.
And it's 115 pages, and it came out about 4 days ago.
So that means that there are probably things in that 115 page. It can't be something simple. They got to complicate it when you start talking that many pages.
Yeah, there's several things in the notice of proposed rulemaking, and some of them are problematic in my opinion.
Name a couple of them.
Well, we're talking about ghost guns. So what, or privately made firearms, and what they want to do with the notice of proposed rulemaking, which will become, law, administrative law, an interpretation of the ATF,
right,
is that you can have the unfinished receiver, and you can get it shipped to you in a box, and we'll put the unfinished receiver in the box. Now that's not a firearm yet.
Correct.
Okay.
It's an unfinished receiver.
It's an unfinished receiver, but we're going to put in the barrel, and we're going to put that in the box. That's probably not a firearm yet. But we'll put in the barrel, the sights, and the two parts here, parts kits for the slide completion and the frame completion. And now this would be a firearm that would require you to have it serialized.
Wait a minute. So that's considered a firearm? The proposal is this is now a firearm?
Yes, under federal law, because I put all these items in a single box, it is now a firearm.
So if it's shipped, so all we're going to do basically to get around that, people would just ship 3 parts one day, 3 parts another, or different boxes. I mean, that makes zero sense.
And what's more is once you've completed your firearm and maybe you pass on or you don't want it anymore, you take it to a dealer.
Right.
The dealer would have to affix a serial number to the firearm.
So now that gets back to the registration, the fingerprint, so to speak,
right,
of a firearm. Right. So even if I made my own firearm, and let's say I don't have the greatest of skills, there's a couple of things I need to have checked. I take it to a gunsmith.
Right. The gunsmith is going to have to put a serial number on that firearm.
Now, can I take that serial number off?
No, that would be a crime. So
it'd be no different than removing the serial number from any other firearm at that point.
Right. And that's a pretty serious felony, especially in Michigan. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So all of this is really, we just want to know who has what and pretty much where they are.
Well, it's one way to do it. It's one way to do it. I actually don't think that simply having a serial number on there is particularly useful in crime fighting, certainly for the people that are going to be following the law.
Right. No, I get that. It's just really crazy. There are a couple of other things in these proposed orders we talked about. We saw coming down the pike, including braces.
Right. So the initiative is that President Biden wishes the Department of Justice to figure out why it is that you can have a stabilizing brace on your pistol, and that doesn't make it a short-barreled rifle. So they're looking to have the definition of a short-barreled rifle to be expanded to include a pistol that has a stabilizing brace on it.
Which realistically does nothing.
No.
I mean, it's, if anyone's ever shot with a brace, it does nothing.
Well, it's always about the money and control. And if you have a short-barreled rifle, then you're going to have to pay a $200 National Firearms Transfer Tax in order to possess it. And so the federal government will get their money, right? They'll get their $200 because you made an NFA item.
Yeah, but again, it's the old tax, and who can afford it? The rich can afford it. And I mean, again, you talk about making your own firearm, as you stated before, it's cheaper and more efficient for me to go buy one.
I think you get a warranty with it too. See, if you make your own, you're your own manufacturer. You have to warranty it yourself.
Yeah, exactly. But again, I just don't, I'm still struggling trying to understand why this is such a big problem, because the more I see, the more I hear, these things really aren't the problem out in society.
Whenever the federal government gets involved in trying to regulate firearms, the firearms industry will figure out a way to work around it. In California, they wanted to do away with assault rifles or AR-15s, so they required you to have a stock that can't have a thumb hole, it can't
all
be
the feature lists. Yeah.
all those different things. So then they would come out with firearms that are operating on the AR-15 fire control system, but don't have those characteristics. So now they're the California ARs. But there's always a way to work around it. So stabilizing braces is a way that people got around having to pay a punitive tax, a $200 tax, just to have a firearm that has less than a 16-inch barrel.
Well, Dean or Terry, on the topic of stabilizing braces, could you, for anybody who's watching who may not kind of know what those are or know the history, could you kind of give us a little bit of history and kind of what they were originally invented for and how they were originally used before kind of people started figuring this out?
Sure. So, a rifle is designed to be shot from the shoulder, and the problem with shooting, and pistols are designed to be shot using the hand. And there are individuals that are suffering from a disability,
Right.
and they may not have the use of both hands. We know a very good friend of ours who is in the Michigan legislature,
Right.
who has a disability, and he uses he can't stabilize a rifle with both hands. So what he has is a pistol with a stabilizing brace that wraps around his arm so that he can use just one arm when he's hunting or shooting. And originally that was what it was intended for, is to and it is what it is used for now, is to provide those with disabilities the same ability to go out and shoot and enjoy the shooting sports and hunting that the rest of us able-bodied have.
Right. And things like that you would think would be a great thing for someone that has a disability. We now have a mechanism to help you protect yourself, to help you hunt, and they want to do away with that.
Well, they want to call it a short-barreled rifle, but the problem is that there are some states where you can't have a short-barreled rifle.
Right.
So in those states where people would have a difficulty, hunting with one arm, you can't hold up a rifle with one arm, or shouldn't. And so they'll do away with the stabilizing braces. Well, that's just going to take them out of the hunt.
Literally.
Yeah.
Well, here's the other thing, about these braces. I mean, if you've ever tried to shoot with one, it's, to me, it seems a lot more difficult, than.
But if you only have one arm, at least you can do it.
Exactly. Like, if you've got two good working arms, it's a lot more difficult. But again, most people that are out here doing the heinous things that they're doing, they are not utilizing, these braces. They're just not.
No.
And the people it's supposed to help, I mean, it's equivalent of saying, let's get rid of all of the, handicap parking, because some people are parking in there who don't have the stickers or who aren't handicapped. And
right.
It's really ridiculous.
It's overkill, and it's not particularly helpful for fighting crime. So no. I don't know why they're doing it, other than to cause misery and difficulty for firearm owners.
Absolutely. Someone just posted this. I just wanted to ask, kind of respond to that. Can I legally sell an unserialized firearm?
Yeah, you can sell a unserialized firearm. The restriction is you cannot manufacture a firearm unless you're a licensee, a licensed manufacturer, with the intent to sell it to someone else. So if you're making it with the intent to have it as your own, and you have it for years, and right. you decide that you don't want it anymore, and you'd like your friend Terry to have it, then you can go ahead and sell it to Terry.
Or give it if you want to just give it to me.
The discount anyway.
There you go. So as we look and we see some of the things that are out there, we talked about obviously the stabilizer, the ghost guns, but none of this is going to prevent crime. I mean, it's not like that's the amazing thing about this. But one of the things that people are really hearing, and I'll say piggybacking on, is the red flag concept. That's another proposed order, and I could tell you, red flag is probably one of the most dangerous concepts that I've ever seen, because what it really does, it takes the Constitution and your due process and it just flips it on its head. I mean, so Dean, imagine you coming home and your wife says to you, "Prove to me you're not having an affair." And it's like, well, how do you prove that? I mean, do you say, well, I was here last night? I mean, there's no allegations in front of you. The burden is on you. And that's what red flag does for all practical purposes. In the states that have it, like, for example, our friends in Florida, one of the big problems is you have to prove that you are not a threat to society. How do you prove that?
Yeah, it shifts the burden of proof.
Can you name me in any area of law where the burden of proof is shifted?
No, this turns our system of justice upside down and requires something completely different. And this is also one of the items that is in Merrick Garland's notice of proposed rulemaking, is that, and in the proposed policy change from the Biden administration, so they want to go forward and produce a model law, a model red flag law for all states, so that it makes it easier for them. The problem is the red flag laws, the ones that exist and the ones that have been proposed, are pernicious things that basically any allegation from anybody.
And that's the problem.
You lose your rights.
Yeah, and that's the problem. If a neighbor's upset with you, I mean, have you ever had a relative upset with you? I mean,
Never.
You start to really look at the people that can just say, I mean, think about this. If I'm Dean's neighbor and maybe I'm not happy with Dean, but I see Dean on, YouTube channels talking about firearms, and I know he's a firearms attorney. What do you think I'm going to say if I'm anti-gun? I'm going to say, hey, Dean's got a problem.
Right.
And how does Dean prove that he doesn't have a problem? That's ridiculous.
Well, there is no mechanism to prove it. You're accused, and now that's enough for the authorities to come into your home and to seize all your firearms, is because someone made an accusation.
Well, and here's the other part that a lot of people don't get. They do it before there's a trial. So normally when there's a trial, you have the presumption of innocence that's cloaked upon you. And, that presumption sticks with you all the way until a judgment is entered, whether it's guilty, not guilty, etc. Here, it's a mere accusation. They come and take your guns. You now have got to prove that you're innocent.
Right. Prove a negative.
Right.
That you're not a threat to yourself or others.
And then, if you can't prove that, they get to keep your guns until
you prove it.
Until you prove it.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, if anyone does not see a problem with that, I just don't quite get it. I mean, these red flag laws are just unreal. And some of the other things that I've noticed is that the rules of evidence don't necessarily apply in some states, believe it or not. Again, hearsay is allowed. Documents that would normally not be admitted in a trial would be allowed. Some of your past conduct, for example, if you've ever, had any kind of domestic violence, and again, you don't even have to be convicted. You just, in some states, the mere accusation. So this accusation put together, it really makes it difficult.
Well, It's virtually impossible to defend yourself. And there isn't any trial, as you said. There isn't any hearing in order for someone to make an accusation. Just make it out on a form and hand it over to the police in some situations, and that's enough.
Yeah, and they can come a knocking, and they have the authority, court authority, to just to take your guns before you get an opportunity to defend yourself.
Right.
That is really that's just not America. I don't know how better to say it. It's just not America. But I will say, you know, for those of you who are watching tonight who are members of Firearms Legal Protection, we are the only company that has in our contract that we will protect you should you ever become, you know, a victim of the red flag laws out there. Firearms Legal Protection will provide you an attorney to fight these accusations against you. And again, you may not think about that now, but having that is a outstanding benefit. And again, some of the states, I think right now we're up to about 20 to 21 states actually have some type of red flag law. And believe you me, more are coming. As Dean and I were just talking about, they're trying to put together a model red flag statute out there that everybody can jump on board. And when the federal government gets behind it, let me tell you, they start throwing money behind things. And if you think about the drunk driving laws out there, .08 is not just something that came to be nationally. It's because the federal government gives money to the states that enforce that, and that's what's going to happen. So make sure that for those of you who are not members of Firearms Legal Protection, there's a button right above, let's see, right here. There it is. Thanks. Little red button you can push to get a discount on Firearms Legal Protection. If you look right there, basically shows $24.95 a month. But again, because you are getting educated, learning about Firearms Legal Protection, getting great legal advice from fabulous attorneys like Dean Greenblatt, we're going to give you a discount on our products, okay? Again, the thing I want you to keep in mind, uncapped attorney's fees, bail bond up to $250,000. We have plans that cover you in all 50 states. Incident scene cleanup, and if they take your firearm as a result of a self-defense incident, we're going to give you up to $1,000 if you don't get that firearm back within 1 year. Now, a couple of other things I want to tell you about. You also get access to the MyFLP app if you're a premium member. So no matter where you go, where you travel, download it on your app. Download the app on your phone, and it'll tell you the local laws of where you are. All of this comes with a 24-hour emergency hotline should you ever have to use lethal force to defend yourself. And it's not just firearms, it's any legal weapon. So again, click on the red button above me there where it says webinar discount. Sign up. If you're already a member, thank you. If you're on our basic plan and want to upgrade, now's a great time to do it as well. So we're going to start to take a few questions right now. And Plenty, we're going to turn it back over to you for some Q&A.
All right, that sounds great. So first of all, so anybody who's clicking that link, make sure, so it's a two-step checkout. Make sure you enter the code webinar at checkout, and that's how you get that discount. So you can click on that through the link we have here. You can click on that later, but just make sure you enter that code webinar, just spelled out, and that's how you'll get that. So we're going to go over to Q&A now. So we've got some interesting stuff submitted. Some of it we've kind of touched on a little bit, some stuff that's new. So can I sell an unserialized firearm? So you mentioned yes, and it sounds like a lot of the rules related to serialization of a weapon only apply if you're an FFL, right? So I assume this is just private party to private party.
Right. Well, like I said, you cannot manufacture a firearm with unless you're licensed. With the intent to sell it to somebody else. But you can sell it, and you could sell it to someone you know. You could give it to someone. Here, Perry, you can have this AR-15 15.
Thank you, Dean.
It's yours now.
Oh, thanks. You heard him say it's mine now, so I'm going to keep it over here. Dean, how many firearms can one person make?
There's no set number.
Okay.
So if you want to make 100 firearms for yourself with the intent that you're going to use them for your own purposes, then you can make 100.
But if I make 100 and turn around and sell 95, I may get a knock on the door.
I suspect that you would. I wouldn't recommend it.
Got it.
Got it. That helps. So it's really just whether you're intending to do it for your own personal purposes or whether you're actually a manufacturer. So we have another question here about red flag laws. So with this model red flag legislation, do you think that we're going to see a national red flag law, or is it more likely going to happen by encouraging the state-to-state model first?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. The national government, even though you wouldn't think so if you pay attention to all the laws that they make, they're not supposed to be making laws that are involving localized criminal activity, or how wide your streets have to be, what your speed limits are.
Right.
Well, that's another example where they will withhold funding if you don't follow what they tell you to do. No, red flag laws are pretty much a state jurisdiction issue, but the federal government is going to do whatever they can to try and get all states to come up with some form of it. So, as Terry said, they may withhold some funding for some important purpose, since the federal government seems to be the entity that's handing out all the money to the states, especially now. They withhold the money unless you agree that you're going to enact some red flag law. Then there's going to be a lot of pressure on state legislatures to enact some form of red flag law. And now the federal government is going to have a model that they can follow.
And I would agree with that. You know, the one thing to keep in mind as it relates to red flags is that it's only for firearms. So if I'm a threat or a danger to myself or others, and I want to use a knife, red flag doesn't apply. If I have anthrax in my basement, red flag doesn't apply. If I build a bomb and people know about it, red flag doesn't apply. The only time red flag actually applies is for firearms and firearms only. So again, this is just in my opinion, just another attempt at a gun grab.
Wow. Yeah, it sounds like it's very specifically targeted towards firearm owners. So another question related to red flag laws, definitely a popular topic tonight because it's a scary topic. Are red flag laws the same from state to state? And I guess if they're not, how do they differ?
Well, they're very different from state to state. Some states, Michigan had a proposed red flag. We talked about that about a year or so ago. And that one was pretty scary because of the people who can actually, I'll use the term, turn you in, okay? Sometimes it's relatives, sometimes it's neighbors. California has co-workers, people you work with. The other thing is the time frame. Some states run 6 months, some states run a year. Every state is different, and every scenario in each state is different. In other words, if you've ever, under the Michigan proposed model, if you've ever lived with someone, you had a roommate, or you dated that person, they don't put a time limit to say, okay, after 5 years, this relationship is over. Someone from your past 10, 15 years ago can call and, say, hey, I think it's a threat to himself or others. Go take his guns.
Goodness, that's frightening. All right, another red flag law question. So why is the ACLU not taking action against red flag laws? As you've said, it turns our American jurisprudence system on its head. He says it's unconstitutional, and I tend to agree, but why is the ACLU not taking this on?
ACLU is, I think, the intent is to protect individual civil liberties. I mean, that's what the CLU stands for, civil liberties. But the problem is that the ACLU historically has ignored the Second Amendment to the Constitution. and does not take up firearm rights cases because it's not in their the policy that they want to see protected.
And I want to go back to the previous question, because this kind of, when you ask, a national law versus a state law, if it's a national law, it's going to be a lot easier to overturn with the United States Supreme Court on a due process issue versus individual states at this point. So that's why, and I'm going to go along with Dean on this, that's why I think this is going to be more of a state-to-state thing. And those folks who wear the black robes in those states will be able to decide what they need to do there. But if you get it nationally, I think it has more of a chance of being overturned by the United States Supreme Court.
So it sounds like, in terms of just the stance of anybody who's pro-gun and standing out against this, whether it's the ACLU or GOA or whoever it is, it's going to be a lot of state-by-state battles rather than just one sweep that we can call victory or progress.
And the hard part that a lot of people don't understand, it takes a lot to get to the United States Supreme Court. And you just can't wake up today and say, hey, I'm going to take this case to the United States Supreme Court and have this overturned. It takes a number of years.
And no guarantee that they'll take the case. So they think They only take between 1% and 3% of cases that are applied for.
Oh, wow. Well, Tony also asked, with it being so hard to prove that you're not a danger to yourself or others, what does FLP do to help, either to help prove this or just, I think he was originally asking about kind of the burden of proof, but I imagine it probably varies a lot by situation. So what does FLP do in these type of cases?
Tony, that's a great question. As a member of FLP, you pick up the phone and you let our attorneys do the work for you. Again, we've got attorneys all across the country, and that's what they're paid to do, is to figure this out for you. In some situations, your guns have just been taken, you're basically being called crazy by the government, that you're a threat to yourself. You don't want to go into court and represent yourself, and that's really not the time to look for someone to help you out, because generally, in most of these cases, you have to respond back to the government, in other words, the state, the county, what have you, that place this red flag burden on you within 7 to 14 days. And that's really not the time to look for an attorney. Calling us, we already have attorneys in place who know exactly how to handle these types of cases.
And Terry, when we were talking about red flag laws a year ago, I remember giving a speech, and we were talking about why is it that these red flag laws need to be enacted anyway. They don't. In all 50 states, there's already a procedure. If someone is determined to be a danger to themselves or others, there's a process by which, with due process, someone can be brought into court and determine if they're actually a danger to themselves or others with testimony. Then they can be ordered not to possess firearms, or they become subject to federal firearms disabilities because they have a mental illness and they've been required to be involuntarily committed to a mental institution. So there's already a process in place, and it is unnecessary to strip away due process to have the same effect. If someone is actually a threat to themselves, if someone is at risk of committing suicide, if someone is a threat to others and they're making overt actions, and that's a standard here in Michigan, there's an overt act which brings it to the attention of the authorities, then they can be hospitalized. And the problem is, even if you have red flag, and even if you take the weapons away, the person's not hospitalized.
Right. So they don't get the help.
They don't get the help, but they still have the knives and the bombs and the poison.
Right.
So what is it that you're actually seeking to do with the enactment of red flag laws? Is it to protect the public? Is it to protect the person that's accused? In each case, that's not necessary. There's already a process in place that's more effective than red flag laws through the mental health system.
And just to add to that, it really comes down to, instead of taking the guns away from the person, you take the person away from the guns.
Exactly.
And that's the big difference.
And it seems like a sad reality of that is people who actually do need help are probably going to be more motivated to to hide and not report anything because now they're afraid of all this stuff that can be used against them.
Right. It discourages people from seeking treatment for themselves if they have a need.
Wow. All right, another question from John here. So the situation with red flag laws being different state to state is reminiscent of the situation several years ago with gay marriage. The Supreme Court of the United States stepped in and changed the law of the land. Why couldn't that just happen with red flag laws?
You want that or want me to try it?
Oh, you have that.
Oh, wow. John, that's a very good question. The difference is, oh boy, I gotta back up to law school for a few minutes here. The difference is this: each individual. Let me get this right. It really comes down to a 14th Amendment equal protection argument. What that basically means is that everybody should be treated the exact same way. So you talk about gay marriage, basically two adults should be able to, according to the Supreme Court, should be able to decide who they marry, and the state should not interfere with that right. Red flag does not necessarily, in my opinion, fall under equal protection. The reason being is that this is not preventing you from having a right. They're kind of looking at this as more of a protection. I know I'm kind of stepping all over this, but
but
sure, you can come to my rescue again, as you always do.
No, not at all. I think you're doing great, but I think the key here is that firearm owners are not a court-recognized protected class. So if you have protected classes, male, female, black, white, national origin, these are considered protected classes. In the equal protection argument, if someone is interfering with those rights, then they can step in, as they did with gay marriage, and say, well, this is a violation of equal protection. Problem is that firearm ownership is not a protected class. At least it's not recognized as a protected class by the Supreme Court. So they're unlikely to step in like that.
So it's not a class of who you are. It's just something you own, and then they regulate it as something you own.
Well, it has to be a court-recognized class.
So another question, all red flag law questions tonight. So can government uniformly apply so-called red flag laws against an entire city without due process? So I guess everything we've talked about now has been individual, but could they take a city or some larger area and try to use red flag laws to remove weapons?
I'll let you go first this time.
It's an interesting question. I think the red flag laws that have been enacted in the various states that have them don't really provide for that. It's an individual issue, but that's a scary thought, and not one I think the government is too far away saying, well, gee, we've got riots, we'll just take all the guns away, like maybe in New Orleans.
Right, and I was just going to say, there are certain things in certain states that will allow the government to prevent you from possessing firearms, whether it's during a catastrophe, whatever they define that is, a national emergency. Your governor in some states has the ability to sign things that will stop people from possessing firearms. So, Jim, the answer is those things are there, but they are rarely enacted.
And I could say after the New Orleans, take the guns from everybody, storm into people's houses and start confiscating them, that there was a effort nationally to have states enact legislation that would prevent executive orders from a governor to take away firearms from a large geographical area.
Yeah, we saw that.
They're only doing it for a short period of time, though, right?
That's right. So it's for your own good.
For your own good.
Well, we saw almost the opposite of that down here in Texas, and I think that's kind of an exception, where I think it was if you're in a federally declared natural disaster area, Texas, like you somehow it changes who can legally carry or not. I think waive some of the licensing requirements. But I think we've definitely, like Katrina, we've seen that example happen in a very negative way.
Absolutely.
So another question here, not a red flag law question. I think this one's more related to the brace situation. So what restrictions do you envision for modern sporting rifles? And first of all, I think modern sporting rifles isn't a term used in any of this law. It's just how we collectively refer to all these. So for a lot of these semi-automatic rifles, do we see anything else coming? Or is it just the brace conversation? What else should we be looking at or worried about?
I remember in part one of this series, we were talking about the proposed legislation federally that would basically bring back the so-called assault weapons ban of 1992. And
is it 92 or 92?
It might be, you're right, 94. The omnibus crime bill from 1994. Right. So it's we're definitely staring down the muzzle, pun intended, of another ban. And the bills are out there. And it's just simply a question of whether or not we have the filibuster in place and what the makeup of the U.S. Senate is as to whether or not these restrictions and bans are going to get enacted. So we're faced with a lot of hurdles in the near future, I'm afraid.
Gotcha. Well, it's a good answer, but a scary forecast as well. So that's the last question we have. We had some good comments tonight, lots of good discussion on the red flag laws, on a lot of the stuff related to privately manufactured firearms. Is there anything you guys want to close us out with? Anything else that you feel like we need to circle back and cover in any more detail?
Dean?
Well, I don't want to get involved too much with politics, but the proposals that came from President Biden don't just include having the Justice Department determine how they're going to control ghost guns, how they're going to come up with a nationwide model for red flag laws, how they're going to spend money doing research on criminal use of firearms, but they also have the appointment of the new head of the ATF, and this gentleman is very much opposed. Yeah, he's got quite a history with ATF, and it seems in every controversial thing that ATF has been involved with, he's been right there front and center. He's notoriously against firearm rights in general. So it's a scary concept that this person could get confirmed to head the ATF.
Yeah, very scary.
David Chipman is his name.
Yes. I just want to say, Dean, thank you for
great fun
for coming out and talking to the members of Firearms Legal Protection. I am very proud to have you in our network, and very proud to have you as my friend.
Well, if you have friends here on the show all the time, you're going to have somebody different every day for the rest of your life. It's just you got a lot of friends. You're well respected in the firearms community and knowledgeable about nationwide laws. Really impressed, and I'm glad to have you as a friend.
Well, thanks, and I'll get you that $50 as soon as we get off the air. So back to you, Tony.
All right, thanks, guys. Well, this was a great conversation, Dean and Terry. It was so great to just get a little bit of clarification on all this stuff, learn more. Guys, everybody listening in, we do these pretty regularly, so stay tuned. We'll be doing more. We're always trying to stay on the forefront of upcoming legislation, things that are threats to what we value as gun owners, as people who like to defend ourselves. So we do a lot of these. We also have a Q&A section on our website, and we have some blog posts that cover some other information on this and some other similar topics too. So make sure to stay tuned and make sure to go sign up. And if you do, use that code webinar and you'll get that discount. So until next time, we'll see you later.
Thank you.
Thank you.